All right, can you hear me? Is this working? Yes? Okay. Welcome everyone to this side event of UN4NAPs, and a warm welcome also to all the speakers. I would give a very brief introduction to the objectives of this side event and will then give the floor to our speakers. My name is Angela Wagner. I work in the UNFCCC Secretariat, specifically on this UN4NAPs initiative that I will tell you a little more about now briefly. And today we want to focus on different kinds of categories of technical assistance that we facilitate through this initiative. And I'm very glad that we have both representatives from countries and also the partner organizations here, and also several colleagues in the room that will be able to complement and share their experience over the last 2 years. This is the agenda for today. So after my brief introduction, we will hear from Emily Matingo from Zimbabwe, together with Carlos from UNDRR, on an example of a review of draft NAPs and an update on needs for technical assistance in Zimbabwe around the NAP implementation. Then we will hear from Mr. Edson Conde from Zambia, together with Mr. Amir Delju from WMO, on an example on longer-term engagement and capacity building. And we'll then move to one more example from Guinea, Ms. Fatoumata Sangare, together with Ms. Silvia Mancini from the Adaptation Fund, on bridging different stakeholders through this initiative. And then hopefully we will have some time for questions. And I'm being told by my colleagues that we have to end on time, so we have until 8. I will be as brief as possible. So I think everyone here is quite familiar with NAPs and the important role they play in the international process as the main vehicle to advance adaptation in countries. This process was established in 2010 through COP16, and the main objectives of the NAP are, on one hand, to reduce vulnerability, and on the other hand, to also integrate climate change adaptation across different sectors and levels in the government. To date, and very glad to also share, in case you haven't seen, we have another NAP that was submitted yesterday by Burundi that makes it 51 NAPs that have been submitted to date. And they are submitted to UNFCCC and then published on the NAP Central platform. UN4NAPs was launched in 2021 by the Secretariat in response to COP mandates for a stronger engagement of international organizations in adaptation. And it offers a platform for countries to share their needs for technical assistance. And we now have a partnership network of more than 50 UN and intergovernmental organizations that are ready to help the countries with their respective requests for technical assistance around NAP formulation and implementation. These are the main categories for technical assistance that are being facilitated through the initiative, from simple technical queries that organizations can just respond to via email, then different knowledge products like tools and guidance material, then also the longer-term capacity developments, and finally a review of draft NAPs and draft documents, which we will also hear about in a bit. This is an overview of the current set of organizations that are part of the initiative. And if you screen this QR code, you get to an overview of the different organizations and the profiles. And there are many different thematic areas that are covered through the partner organizations. And this you will also be able to see in the profiles, and we will also hear about that in a bit. This is some examples of the kind of technical assistance that are offered through the initiative by the organizations, and we will also hear about some of them. So, for example, support around the development of knowledge and information systems for adaptation planning and implementation, the use and application of frontier technologies, research and systematic observations, where we have WMO with us here, and also, for example, the design of implementation strategies. And this is just an excerpt, just to give you a snippet of what's available. Also to give you an overview on kinds of requests that we have received from countries. For example, the aforementioned technical review of NAPs. Also then specific questions on, for example, questions related to biodiversity or related to oceanography, where really expert knowledge is required. And just to also give an indication on the countries that we have most been engaging with, as you see, we have mostly been engaging with the African countries, and this initiative has been focusing on LDCs and SIDS, and all are invited to share their requests for technical assistance at an ongoing basis. And in addition, what we also do is these kinds of fora that we are in right now, where we try to facilitate this kind of exchange between the organizations and the countries. And this is just an overview of what we did this year, where we had a UN4NAPs forum, the second of its kind in Chile, with 5 thematic sessions, where countries also shared their needs for technical assistance, and organizations explained how they're able to support. We also contributed to a NAP implementation workshop in Bahrain that took place in May, where we had different experts discussing the kinds of requirements and needs from the legal setup needed for implementing the NAP to finance and other topics. And then, of course, also we organized events in Bonn at the SB 55, and then in Korea and Kenya later in the year. And here at the COP, we are, in addition to the side event, we also invite all countries to let us know if they would like to meet with any of the partner organizations, and we're happy to facilitate that and see who's able to help, or to just let us know what kind of assistance is needed, and we will then look for the support in the network. And this is a very straightforward initiative where you are just invited to send an email with the national focal point in copy to UN4NAPs at unfccc.it, and then we will identify the support, and usually within a few weeks at the latest, you should get several responses from organizations. And these are just a few links, and we will also make this available on the event website, so you can have a look later. We have the aforementioned profiles, newsletter, and also the brochure that gives a little more depth into what I was just explaining. And this is also, again, the email address in the corner for any questions or, of course, requests that you may have. And now I would then like to move to the part where we have inputs from organizations and countries. So I would like to start with the example of the review of the draft NAP, where I would like to hear from Emily, and I will just move over there so you can be here. Okay. Sorry, there's only space for 6 people, so I'll be here. And we'll ask some questions from here. I would like to ask, so Emily Matingo is works with the government of Zimbabwe, and in February this year, Zimbabwe shared their draft NAP with us at the UNFCCC, and to be reviewed by the LEG and its NAP technical working group and UN4NAPs, and then a few weeks later, in mid-March, we then shared the consolidated inputs for the draft NAP document, where 12 organizations had provided their inputs. And one of them is with us here and will be able to tell us a bit more. And I'll just list them also. So we had inputs from, and I hope no one is missing in this list, WHO, UNDRR, WFP, UNHCR, WMO, the Commonwealth Secretariat, CJAR, or the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN University, who's also represented here today, UNU, Habitat, the Adaptation Fund, who's also here with us, and UNDP. Now, Emily, maybe you can tell us a bit about how these inputs helped you in advancing the NAP, and give us also an update on where you are. I believe it is quite close to being submitted, if I'm not mistaken. And then also, it would be great to hear what your current needs for technical assistance are as you move towards the implementation phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. That was quite a mouthful. I hope I'm audible to colleagues in the audience. I would start by saying that the process of formulating a national adaptation plan requires extensive consultations at both national and subnational level, and also to engage with multilateral agencies such as the UNFCCC and the Adaptation Fund, among other colleagues that are here today. And as Zimbabwe, we have undergone that process, and is the key lessons that came from the review process, or just by maybe touching on them at a broad level, was the aspect to say that we need to emphasize on the inclusion of vulnerable groups and constituencies in formulating guiding principles for the National Adaptation Plan, because really NAPs resonate around addressing the issues of vulnerability. So if it's not pronounced in terms of the guiding principles, then it would defeat the purpose. And another lesson that we also learned related to the fact that as we are formulating NAPs, we need to ensure that we align them with our priorities or the country context, to ensure that as you are implementing that national adaptation plan, it's working on address the priorities from the country within the context of building resilience. And then also on the sidelines, I think that we have also learned from the process of formulating the NAP that it's important to be participatory as much as possible, so that you leave no one behind in terms of what are the vulnerabilities, what are the possible priorities, and so forth, because it's not just a matter of the policy level, just saying that in terms of the priority there are 1, 2, 3, but the priorities have to be reached out through a consultative process, whereby also the vulnerable constituencies and the sectors are able to also feed into the process, thereby coming up with something that is country driven. Then another important aspect relates to the fact that national adaptation plans, and by their very word, the first word national is underlined, meaning to say that they need to reflect the country context, the national circumstances, and are country driven. This I'm emphasizing because I think as you may be aware, at least maybe over 49 national adaptation plans have been submitted, I think, to the NAP Central. But it's also important for a country, as it is formulating their NAPs, that they just also consider their national context, so that at the end of the day, the document that they come up with is really country-driven. It speaks to the national circumstances, the vulnerability, and it's something that they can implement aligning with the national priority. And then lastly, in terms of the lessons learned, is to always ensure that there is high-level buy-in, that to enhance all the processes in terms of ultimately owning the National Adaptation Plan. And then as Zimbabwe, we have finalized the National Adaptation Plan. It will soon be launched at a later date, to be advised. But in terms of the key needs going forward towards implementation, I would just want to reaffirm issues such as support in terms of capacity building of climate change mainstreaming working groups that have been identified within the National Adaptation Planning process. Would want to ensure that those groups within the sectors are able to effectively mainstream climate change issues within their respective sectors on a sustainability basis. Because what we also learned in terms of formulating the NAPs is that let's suppose I'm capacitated today, maybe tomorrow I may have moved to sections, or maybe something may have happened to me. So we would want to ensure that the capacity building is such that it's on an ongoing basis, so that we enhance the pool base of people that are able to articulate and integrate climate change issues within the various socio-economic sectors underpinning the economy. Then there is also the aspect to do with awareness, to affirm the point that awareness shouldn't be a one-step event that you gather people for a day and you say we have raised awareness on climate change issues, but it should be something that is done on a regular basis until we arrive at a point where we have behavioral shift in terms of low emission development, even at household level, and also more so to do with resilience at household level as well. And there's also the issue of ensuring that whatever we do, we also employ a gender lens within the context of mainstreaming climate change. And lastly, it's probably to say that we would want to also have support in terms of the rollout of the NAP once it's launched, and also it comes up with a monitoring and evaluation systems framework, which will also require support towards actually ensuring that stakeholders responsible for feeding into the NAP implementation are capacitated in terms of the monitoring and evaluation. Ultimately, we believe that it would then feed into the whole aspect of the global stock take if we're able to monitor our progress in terms of adaptation within the initial cycle for our National Adaptation Plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And maybe you can take one question from the floor. Any maybe comments or clarifications, or also from the other panelists, of course?
Yes.
Yes? Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, so this is Duri Mahmood from Oxford Policy Management, and I'm from Pakistan. So my question is that many times when we see the national determined contributions, the NDCs, they have some priorities, targets, and actions related to the resilience side, so that has to be sort of translated in the NAPs. So a lot of countries are not speaking, like the NAPs are not speaking with NDCs and vice versa. There's not synergies and coherence. So just wanted to ask you that how well you have aligned your NAP with the NDCs as well, especially with some thematic areas like ocean actions and, you know, coastal communities and areas which are not like that well elaborated in many of the existing NAPs as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Within the Zimbabwean context, the National Adaptation Plan, the draft that will soon be launched, is aligned to the country's NDCs. The NDCs focus on an economy-wide approach to building resilience, but specifically touching on 4 pillars to do on climate-smart agriculture, early warning, resilient infrastructure, as well as resilient water resources. So you would find that given that there are just 4 components underpinning adaptation within the NDCs, when you are tackling, let's say for instance, resilient water resources development or climate smart agriculture or early warning, you find that those require interlinkages with various sectors, thereby ultimately then aligning with the draft national adaptation plan. So we believe that we have made concerted efforts to ensure that the two speak to each other, so that ultimately the implementation or the progress of the NDCs of the adaptation can also be reflected as we implement the NAP. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And also I'd like to just add a comment. One thing that I didn't mention in the introduction, but that I think you will also be aware of this, that there's a specific mandate of the GCF to expedite support to both the formulation and the implementation of NAPs. So in that sense, it is really important for the countries to formulate their NAP, and with 51, so that makes a third of all developing countries that to date have submitted a NAP. There's still a lot that needs to happen, and we have been working, we have been together with our executive secretary working with the countries, especially with LECs and SIDS, intensely also through the leg this year to really advance this work. And we hope that there will be a number of countries that still will submit until the end of the year, and then also have that kind of support from the GCF for the implementation. I would now like to also ask Carlos Uribe from UNDR on the one hand how they provided that support that was requested by Zimbabwe with the draft NAP, and which areas maybe you were focusing on, what kind of advice you were giving, and then also on the other hand, more generally, maybe give a brief overview on the kinds of assistance that countries could request from you through UN4NAPs along those 4 categories.
Thank you, Angela. Can you hear me well? Yes, excellent, good night. I wanted to say thank you to the UN4NAPs initiative, because it's giving the opportunity to contribute and really participate in the review of NAPs. I wanted also to start asking you, how are you tonight? Because it's been a very long day, isn't it? Sleepy? Okay. So the second question I have, and I just wanted you to raise your hands. Who knows the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction? Yeah, a lot of people. Who knows the target E of the Sendai framework? That is related to the formulation of national disaster reduction strategies. And this is the connection point, and this is the interaction we're having with the UN4NAPs. And I will start answering the question by the end, and maybe giving you an idea of what is the proposal of UNDR, particularly looking at the adaptation assistance we're giving, and the real coherence and the benefits we're having in the implementation of the Sendai framework is because we're trying to give some coherence to those policy instruments that are the National Adaptation Plan and the Disaster Reduction National Strategy, taking advantage of the Paris Agreement and the target E of the Sendai framework. So the idea is to give more coherence and make our disaster risk reduction more climate-centered, and also providing all these disaster risk reduction principles to the elaboration of the national adaptation plans, considering that there is a common ground between climate change adaptation and DRR, and we're building on this common ground, this connecting tissue that is giving a lot of things to do. As you know, looking at the statistics, the number of disasters have doubled in the last 20 years. The 93% of the disasters we are putting in the statistics are climate related. So it's making sense to have some coherence between the action we are trying to design between DRR and climate change adaptation. And through the our action within the UN4NAPs, we are trying to make those national adaptation plans risk-informed. We have evidence that national adaptation plans are guiding to maladaptation, and maladaptation is worsening the situation of vulnerability and exposure of specific locations, and is also affecting the adaptive capacity of a specific place. So the idea is really to improve those interactions, and we are using different elements as early warning systems that could be seen as an adaptive measure, but is also a disaster reduction measure or nature-based solutions. Going to the assistance we're giving, and we gave to Zimbabwe, and in the elaboration, we have elaborated a technical guidance that is giving all the elements and taking as close to the ground the integration of disaster reduction principles into the elaboration of national adaptation plans. And particularly, we're giving a lot of importance to the priority number one, that is the risk knowledge. So how to describe really vulnerability and exposure, and really give the baseline and the current status to design well the adaptation measures we are guiding with the adaptation plan. So we are making use of different resources we have. There is a lot of databases that are providing information about the past events, if we are talking about loss and damages, but we are trying to include in those NAPs also the variability induced by climate change. So we are using the past to look into the future and also have an idea of what could happen, taking into account this variability induced by climate change. So have a clear idea of scenarios, and also giving some coherence. And I like the question of our colleague from Pakistan. Yes, yeah, because within the support we're giving to the review of the NAP, the elaboration of the NAPs, we're trying to give some coherence between the NDCs and the adaptation goals in a single country to really have a comprehensive climate disaster reduction and climate adaptation plan that is guiding us to a clear, integrated implementation approach. And we are working a lot with the LEG. Who knows what's the LEG here? The Less Development Expert Group. So that is also providing technical support to the review of NAP on LDCs. So basically, what we're doing is supporting the information of those NAPs, so providing as much as possible information, taking advantage of the disaster loss databases, but also there is a lot of organizations, including UNDR, the World Bank, that are providing risk profiles or information about the situation related to exposure and vulnerability. So as much as information that we can use to establish a very well-designed baseline to the decision making that we are guiding with the NAPs. And also, we're trying to bring together different communities at the national level. Within the UN4NAPs and the comprehensive risk management approach, we have a strategic association with the UNFCCC through the Paris Agreement. But we are also trying to bring the finance component and the development component. We are not going in the right way if we are not connecting disaster reduction and climate change adaptation into development and bringing the finance component. So within the development of the NAPs, or the support we are giving to the NAPs, we are also promoting the establishment of national disaster reduction and climate platforms that are bringing together different stakeholders at the national level that have the responsibility of the development of adaptation measures, but also different sectors of housing, water, agriculture, and particularly finance and development. And with the idea to provide more information and more accurate information, we are trying also to associate the national statistics offices on this initiative. So this is more or less the UNDR interaction between CCC through the UN4NAPs, and also how we are rolling out the comprehensive risk management initiative in different countries. So, and just to give you some numbers, we are supporting 40 countries. In most of the cases, we are going in association with the adaptation unit of the UNFCCC. We have been organizing regional workshops, national workshops, doing capacity transfer activities. We are designing tools and resources to really take us closer to the ground how to design those elements, particularly those policy instruments that are the National Disaster Reduction Strategy and the National Adaptation Plan. And one important number maybe, there is 51 countries that have now a NAP.
Yes.
And the other side, talking about policy instruments at the national level, there is 136 that have reported that have provided a national disaster resolution strategy. That is one of the main policy instruments that are giving this coherence. So now we are focusing more on the
Okay, now it's working. Thank you very much for the comments. I'm Assunção Cristas, I'm from Portugal. I'm a law professor and a lawyer at the Portuguese Lisbon-based law firm, where I'm responsible for the environmental area and for ESG services platform, and I'm Foreign Minister for the Environment. And my question has to do with, I would say, more sustainable, resilient, and bankable solutions as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the question, and the funding, especially for the implementation, is of course essential to have a plan for that. And in yesterday, maybe some of you were able to follow our event yesterday that we convened, where we had the head of the GCF and the Adaptation Fund and several ministers, including Zambia also, and where we discussed this gap in this adaptation gap and the awareness activities that should be done on a regular basis, and also having this gender lens strengthened. If any of the UN4NAPs partners in the room are able to help on this side, maybe even just indicate the possibility that soon there could be that possibility, that would be very much appreciated, just to also close the loop and have that kind of reaction to what we heard from Zimbabwe. There, yes, I see. I was misinterpreting your sign language, Himanshu. So I said it would be great to hear also from the UN4NAPs partners in the room if there is the possibility to respond to what we heard from Zimbabwe, from Emily. So the need for capacity building activities for the implementation of the NAP.
Through this exchange, in touch with different parties on the preparation of NAP as well as in the implementation phase. Particularly the MEL part, monitoring, evaluation and learning, is something where you have rightly pointed, Emily, a lot of capacity training and hand-holding and knowledge exchange is needed. And that is something we have been working closely with a few parties, and of course there are questions of having capacities at our end, the funding support and so on. So there are many obstacles in just having this small bit of exercise done and having an adaptation fund, for example, in the room with readiness windows and all. So hopefully there are many things in pipeline that would allow us to work on this closely. But what I can definitely say is that the monitoring, evaluation and learning, that is where we see a lot of requests coming. That is where we see a lot of possibilities in terms of capacity building and learning together, and very happy to bring that in. There are a few additional points, but maybe I will come to that later. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Orville Gray from the NAP Global Network. Hi, Emily. Happy to provide support, as we've been doing with Zimbabwe to date, on all the areas that you've identified. We have, as many of you may already know, in partnership with the Adaptation Committee, working on the MEL toolkit, for which we're doing a soft launch during this COP, with the full kit to be ready by March or so of next year. But we have been supporting a number of countries with respect to their monitoring, evaluation, and learning on for NAPs. And we would be happy to see how we can structure a program around that. With respect to capacity building, we do understand the challenges. Pretty much it's more about butts in seat, having, people there. We have supported countries through partnerships in terms of looking at the embedded officer style approach, and this is something that we can discuss in terms of looking to see how we can potentially get one or two persons to come in and support the work that is going on to further the implementation of the NAP. And of course, in terms of getting the NAP launched and submitted to the UNFCCC, if there's room for any assistance required to close that gap and have it submitted to the UNFCCC, as you know, we'd be very happy to support in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Orville. I believe we will certainly be able to get back to this if there's some time at the end for further comments, and otherwise, of course, we'll be happy to also facilitate meetings while we are all here in Dubai. With that, I would like to move to the second example, where we have Mr. Nkonde from Zambia and Mr. Deju from WMO, who will share with us their joint their collaboration based on a request from Zambia for technical assistance for research and systemic observations in support of adaptation assessment, planning and implementation, and where WMO has been really helpful in responding to that. We had a series of meetings in this context, first facilitated online, and then we made use of the opportunity when we were all in Bonn to meet, and that also was a bigger meeting than with more countries that had a similar need for technical assistance, where then WMO provided insights on the kind of work that they are doing. And then finally this resulted in a training facilitated, but I will let you explain further, and maybe Mr. Nkonde, you could share some background on this request and the kind of assistance and how it helped you advance. And welcome, thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to this event. So for us, I think the request started from when we started developing our NAP. We realized that there were gaps in terms of the science, in terms of understanding and making sense of the science, identifying, for example, the climate risks, the vulnerabilities that exist in Zambia, because I think that's the basis for the formulation of the NAP. So I think that's the background in terms of our request for WMO to come and provide that support so that the science basis in terms of identifying the risks that exist in the country and also the vulnerabilities, and also using that information to identify the adaptation options that exist, but also prioritizing the actions. So probably I can give a setting in terms of Zambia and what the climate is like there. So we are a country in the southern part of Africa, and we are about 750,000 square kilometers. And basically we divide our country into 3 climate zones. And we have been experiencing very extreme weather events, climate events ranging from flooding, flash floods, and a lot of dry conditions, which affects a lot of communities. Our country is about 18 to 20 million people, and more than half of those are engaged in agricultural activities. Our power in terms of electricity generation comes from hydro, which is also very vulnerable to changes in the climate. So that's the setup. So as we started developing our NAP, we realized that we needed to have science-based climate information that will form the basis for developing our NAPs. And also realizing that even after we developed our NAPs, we needed financing for us to go, for example, to GCF and other climate funds. We have to give the reason, the climate rationale. Why are we, what are we facing in terms of climate change, in terms of climate risks and vulnerabilities? So we needed to have that enhanced climate science, and therefore we noted that there was opportunity to engage UN-NAPs and also to engage WMO so that they can strengthen our understanding of the science, so that we can generate information that can help us in terms of having very strong national adaptation plans, but also after, when we start implementing the plans, requesting for resources will require that we have that science-based rationale. So that's the background in terms of how we went about engaging UN-NAPs as well as WMO.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to add one element that I think is important. You're the director of the meteorological department, correct?
Yes.
And I believe one element that we have been observing a lot is that through these interactions, we also help to bring the right people together. So whereas some organizations maybe talk to certain focal points and would not necessarily involve you in the discussions, having these kind of interactions really helps to bring the right people together. And in this case, of course, you work closely with WMO, I believe. So that's, I think that's also really great. And we will talk about the needs that you have right now, as you, congratulations, just submitted the NAP last month. And before that, maybe we can hear from Amir on the side of the kind of support that that WMO was able to provide and is able to provide. And I just need to put the presentation in there.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Thank you very much, Angela. Actually, I have a short presentation, but it's too late to put it on the screen. I can talk it. We started an initiative with Green Climate Fund in 2018 to really systematize the availability of scientific information and data in adaptation projects and NAPs. That led us to the publication of the methodology, which is available on the web. I can share with you later. And then we started a series of training workshops for a group of countries who had similar capabilities or similar climatic conditions. One of those which we organized was last year in Johannesburg, and Zambia was an invited country. So what we provided was assistance on research and systematic observation data, how to analyze it, how to learn the methodologies in a basic way. At the same time, we had also invited NDAs from GCF of countries to learn about the sources of scientific information and data, the need for technical assistance and capabilities that should be built in countries. So the participants little bit increased their proficiency in interpretation of the data. Data is not sufficient by itself. Even if you analyze it, you need to interpret that. You need to have expert judgment to put that in NAP proposals to make it value added and acceptable for reviewers. On the other hand, climate data by itself is not sufficient. We need non-climatic contributing factors that come from sectors like agriculture, water, health, energy, and disaster risk reduction. This requires a kind of multidisciplinary cooperation at national level. These are what we were training at the workshop. This is just background that I'm explaining. In the end, they were learning how to work together to co-produce the best solutions. But this was not very practical. It was just a kind of replication of the scenarios they need to implement at national level. Fortunately, we received kind of more tangible expression of interest from Zambia to continue and build on that workshop. We proposed our package that could include technical assistance for country-specific scenarios, to train their experts to be independent in using their data if there is inconsistency or gap in data, by which methodologies we can support through our consultants to provide, to fill those gaps. We also run or implement quality management system in the Met service to guarantee and assure the user community that the products are, have the highest quality and assurance. In the end, the package that we had proposed also led to the establishment of a national framework for climate services. That's an umbrella institutional system that brings together all stakeholders at national level. However, having such ambition is not easy. It requires funding support, and the challenges that we have observed since last year is that there are multiple breaks and inconsistencies in different blocks. There is no connection between technical support process compared to financial support process and NAP readiness. In NAP readiness, by default, it is understood that data is available, expert judgment is available, experts can analyze the data, they have the best and most updated methodologies, which are not the case. For each of these items, we need to hire international consultants, we need to organize workshops. All are, cost intensive activities. So what we suggested was, please NDA to GCF of country, now that you understand, you have been in the workshop, now that you understand the challenges, please help us to support through NAP readiness to meet these requirements. But this has not happened. So this is a kind of big gap that should really be solved from GCF and from other funding supporting communities and agencies. And also, I see that this is our experience from scientific community. Technical support and capacity development is not seen as a kind of core issue. We have seen many workshops with lots of expenses, best available science. Best available science does not come by itself with raw data. And then another experience that we have is different countries have different dynamics. What we learned from Zambia and managed to build and implement does not work even in the neighboring country, does not work in another country. For each country, we have different types of challenges, they have different types of priorities that makes our job more difficult. In one country, NDA has a good connection to meteorological service. In another country, they don't talk to each other, even they don't know each other, and it's very challenging. Fortunately, UN4NAPs in between facilitates a lot. That's why we are sitting here together to listen to each other, but implementing all these aspirations and demands is very challenging. And finally,
our priority right now is to see how we can start implementing some aspects of the NAP, but also if we can produce the sector NAPs for water, for health, for agriculture, because now that becomes much more tailored and much more directional, if I may say that. So I think those are the aspects that we are looking at to generate now NAPs that speak to those key sectors. Yeah. So yeah, basically that's what we want. But also because now we are going into much more detailed. I think that capacity in terms of the science that speaks to the sectors, so that we can tailor the information to each sector, to each location. I think that would be very critical also, so that the science, the resolution of the science is enhanced. So that capacity also to the med service, but also to the other sectors, so that we are able to produce the information that is specific to the sector, specific to the different climate regions of the country.
Thanks a lot. And there will certainly be some reactions from people in the room. We have UNEP in the room and UNU. Of course, also the NAP Global Network, although not part of the UN4NAPs initiative, but they'll certainly also be happy to comment. And any of the other panelists. We heard about the funding gap and the different sectoral NAPs. That's something that the health NAP, for example, in particular, the World Health Organization is really strengthening that element lately quite a lot. So I'd be happy to put you in touch in case you haven't started that conversation yet. And I'm looking around who would want to comment on either what we heard from WMO or Zambia, or ask questions, clarification, or yes, I see Himanshu. Do we still have that?
Hi, excellent presentation from both of you. I can only reiterate on behalf of the UN universities, sectoral NAPs are something that we have been looking closely at. So, of course, depends on what sort of sector. We, as an organization, are mandated to provide science into the policy making in the UN system, and we want to bring that from science into the action part. So, of course, very much looking forward to hear more about it. UNFCCC UN4NAP initiative has been instrumental in providing further information. So, of course, when the details are there, we would be very interested in taking it forward. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. One small also addition. Actually, in NAPs, a major missing point from scientific aspect is attribution to climate change. That's very difficult and a kind of tricky point, how to identify the impacts which are resulted from real climate change, not from natural climate variability. And that's what very high quality experts can bring that understanding into NAPs, and this is what we can help. And very few countries have that capacity, but they can share their experience. Attribution is the most important thing.
Thanks very much for those comments. And yes, sure, we heard about the importance of science also from Zambia, so happy to see how we can also link you to UNU, either here still tomorrow, I think, yes, or otherwise virtually in the follow-up. And with that, I would like to move to the third group of panelists, where we have Sylvia from the Adaptation Fund and Fatoumata from Guinea. And can we do it in English? Ou en français plutôt? So this is an example of from this June, where Guinea reached out to us with a question regarding the Adaptation Fund. And well, over to Sylvia.
Thank you, Angela. I will start in English and then we'll continue in French. Thank you we from the Adaptation Fund are very pleased to be here because we are one of the 45 partners of UN4NAPs. And the reason why we got involved with UN4NAPs is because one of the common requests that we have from countries, from countries is to really provide, as it was said by other panelists, technical assistance to the effort of assessing climate finance. So accessing climate finance is one of the most important aspects of the NAPs. Support then for NAPs implementation is really through simplified access to grant funding, and in the case of the Adaptation Fund, for concrete, localized, and effective adaptation that can be scaled up. So the fund, of course, has a very important role during the programming process, because the programming process has to be done according to the NAPs and according to the NDCs. So really all proposals are essentially screened against NAPs and NDCs once they exist. And also it is very important the country makes their strategic choices about the use of IF resources in the priority sectors. I'm very glad to hear about the NAP in the sectors. I think that is extremely important because you scale down and you go into much more detailed, and that's very important. The Adaptation Fund is a country-driven fund. Is also it does not have a choice in terms of sector. We are the listener. We facilitate. The sectors are of adaptation are defined at country level. So we respond to that country needs, even in the choice of the sectors of action. One of the characteristics of all the programming, and today we have a joint pavilion with the 4 climate funds, and we were really having an event on the complementarity and coherence between the climate funds. And definitely one of the elements in the NAPs is to really being aware of having projects that are scalable, projects that are that can be easily funded and replicated, but easily funded also in a scale-up framework, like, for example, we have between the IF and the GCF. So we have a set, on adaptation funding windows that, of course, are very comprehensive, and is the way to then address that capacity in terms of building the technical capacity at the NAPs. And in this respect, readiness was mentioned a number of times. We have very interesting activities in terms of the CPDA between the GCF and the IF, the community of practice, literally, where all of these elements can be shared. But then, of course, it goes beyond that. It goes the readiness. It goes into the project preparation and during even the project implementation. So the response in terms of what we can do for country request is for supporting the NAP implementation is to literally delivery of specific knowledge products and example, and really having a scalable and important lesson learned, I would say, from adaptation practice, technologies and tools in a variety of sectors. Also, the bilateral meeting to discuss accreditation and project proposal, and that's why we're coming close. And then to the experience that we had with Guinea, and which is really the title is very relevant, bridging between key stakeholders through facilitated dialogue. So in the case, for example, of Guinea, we had a facilitation of an accreditation technical conversation between Guinea and the IF Secretariat. And this, of course, was based on the request of the country. So really facilitating the accreditation process. We are, the Adaptation Fund is the one who pioneered the direct access and also the enhanced direct access. And we have, of course, an important accreditation process for national, regional, and multilateral implementing entities. But one of the most important elements is to make sure that the accreditation process does not become a barrier to NAP implementation. So also facilitation through UN4NAPs, which was an incredible experience, started now at this point we have almost 1 year of experience with UN4NAPs, supporting also the facilitation of readiness access conversation between the designated authority, which are our focal points at country level, and the IF Secretariat. The same is for facilitation of IF program implementation, again with the focal points. My last slide is just an entree on the work that we have done in terms of the accreditation, and I'm going very quickly on few points with regard to the barriers that we are trying also through the help of UN4NAPs in terms of accreditation processes that needs to be timely. So we have helped the familiarization of all the accreditation criteria, so the understanding of the supporting documentation requirement and the evidence-based review by the accreditation panel. We have insisted on really regular communication, and this was the case in the case of Guinea, to ensure that the supporting documentation, the understanding is very clear, so that they can really respond to the panel questions, and also that there is at the level of conversation, it's a conversation with the entity, it's the conversation with the focal point at the level of the country, so that there is always a high commitment to close all of the gaps. And then, of course, to make sure that the policies are evidence-based, so there is always a track record that starts much longer before the policies are actually finalized, and that's one of the most important elements for the accreditation, which I now je te laisse la parole.
Alors, merci Sylvia. Merci également à Angela. As they say, my English, according to my English, I'm going to speak in French, and then Angela can be translate for you. Ok, donc, comme elle l'a dit, mon intervention, déjà, je remercie UN4NAPs à travers l'implication de Angela, mais aussi du Fonds d'adaptation à travers Sylvia, pour l'opportunité qu'on m'offre ce soir afin de m'exprimer ici par rapport aux facilités que la République de Guinée a pu obtenir à travers ses institutions. Et donc, comme je le disais, c'est vraiment une opportunité, et tout a commencé, en tout cas avec moi, à la COP 27 à Sharm el-Sheikh, où Angela, l'UN4NAPs, à travers Angela, quand même, nous a permis de faciliter une rencontre bilatérale de ma délégation avec le Fonds d'adaptation afin de discuter des aspects d'accréditation. Nous avons une entité dénommée le Centre d'études et de recherche en environnement serré, qui est actuellement en cours d'accréditation auprès du Fonds d'adaptation. Et ce fonds, du moins ce centre aujourd'hui, on a entamé son accréditation depuis 2019. Et donc, vu le temps que ça a pris jusqu'ici et tout, il était important quand même pour le pays d'avoir quelques échanges avec le Fonds d'adaptation afin de comprendre justement les points de blocage la poursuite de l'évolution justement de cette accréditation. Et c'est là que vraiment a intervenu UN4NAPs, parce qu'ils nous ont facilité d'avoir un entretien avec le fonds d'adaptation que j'estime bien a été très fructueux pour la Guinée, parce qu'à Sharm el-Sheikh, on a pu quand même discuter de ces différents blocages et des questions liées également à la documentation. Et comme vous le savez, souvent, l'accréditation et tout ce qui est question de financement se font souvent en anglais et tout. Et donc, de fois, c'est un peu compliqué pour les pays. Mais à travers cet échange-là, on a pu comprendre justement quelques points de blocage, notamment liés aux documents d'audit, les capacités du centre liées aux questions juridiques. Et donc, moi, cela m'a permis, en tant que point focal du Fonds d'adaptation pour la Guinée, de pouvoir synthétiser en fait tous ces aspects et arriver au pays, voir on peut justement booster la volonté politique à essayer d'accompagner le centre afin de pouvoir lever ces obstacles-là, avancer dans le cadre de notre accréditation. Donc ça a été une très belle chose. Et aussi la réunion des organes subsidiaires au niveau de Bonn en juin, également à travers toujours UN4NAPs, on avait pu tout ça dans le cadre de l'accélération vraiment de l'accréditation du Centre d'études et de recherche en environnement. Et également, nous sommes en échange avec UN4NAPs, notamment avec mon interlocutrice Angela, pour voir justement, parce que nous sommes également sur l'élaboration de notre PNA, le NAPS. Donc, notre plan d'action, notre plan national d'adaptation est vraiment en cours et ça évolue vraiment bien. Et donc, cela veut dire qu'au terme de l'élaboration de ce document, il va y en découler des activités qu'il faudra implémenter. Et donc, c'est une occasion aussi qu'on avait saisie avec UN4NAPs pour que l'on puisse, dans l'avenir, profiter de certaines assistances, et notamment les accompagnements techniques liés justement à fixer, par exemple, certains bailleurs par rapport à notre NAP pour la mise en œuvre des activités qui en découleront. Mais aussi, nous avons déjà quelques projets, des idées de projets, et pouvoir avoir des projets qu'on puisse être de leur mise en œuvre. Donc, ce sont là quelques points sur lesquels, en tout cas, nous travaillons avec UN4NAPs et donc que nous apprécions beaucoup dans le cadre de leur travail. Donc, ce soir, c'était vraiment une opportunité pour moi que je vienne parler un peu sur cette facilitation qu'ils offrent au pays et donc qu'il faut saisir. Je pense que tout à l'heure, M. Amir en parlait dans sa présentation par rapport au pays PMA que nous sommes, à venir vraiment saisir ces opportunités d'accompagnement technique. Et donc, c'est une occasion pour nous, les PMA. Malheureusement, peut-être on n'en a pas beaucoup dans la salle, mais je pense qu'on ne manquera pas de diffuser l'information pour qu'on puisse quand même saisir ces différentes opportunités d'accompagnement, de support technique auprès de UN4NAPs qui a certainement beaucoup d'expérience et des experts aguerris également qui pourront accompagner le pays. Et donc, je devrais commencer par là, mais je vais le terminer ainsi. Et je suis Madame Fatoumata Sang, focale changement climatique auprès de la République de Guinée. Et donc, en ma qualité de point focal Fonds d'adaptation pour la Guinée, c'est pourquoi je viens ici aujourd'hui pour cette petite intervention. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Non, simplement, je dois dire que ça a absolument augmenté l'engagement au niveau des pays. Le moment qu'il y a le UN4NAPs, c'est aussi une opportunité d'avoir cet important engagement au niveau des pays. Donc, était vraiment une opportunité que si nous pouvons être sûrs qu'il va être...
Et donc, ce sont des aspects qui sont contenus dans notre CDN et auxquels aussi s'aligneront justement notre plan national d'adaptation qui est en cours d'élaboration. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. We have now 10 minutes left, so I will make a brief summary of what we just heard. I hope that's okay. Fatoumata shared with us that the interactions with the adaptation, as the NAP is advancing and will be implemented, there will be additional needs for technical assistance. On the one hand, also to have the access to funding, so the formulation of projects will be essential for the country to then submit proposals to the GCF and the Adaptation Fund and others. But also, Fatoumata was referring to what we heard from Amir before regarding the technical assistance and saying that really, especially the LDCs should tap into the opportunities that are there much more in terms of getting that support funding windows that are interesting for the country will open up. That's maybe also important to say that this accreditation is really essential. And then Fatoumata added that in Guinea, the NAP and the NDC are closely aligned. The priorities in both documents are the same, they are national priorities. And similar to what we heard from Zambia before, there's the focus on agriculture, focus on coastal questions, and that is both reflected in the NDC and in the NAP. And Sylvia, please add, because yes.
I think we're good for the question. I think you have summarized very well. But definitely one of the accreditation is one part of the big picture for NAP implementation in terms of access to finance. And the readiness is not only readiness, support is for the accreditation, and it's also after the accreditation. Once an entity becomes accredited, can be a national, a regional, or a multilateral.
People in the room, the audience. Otherwise, I would just again invite you all to reach out at any point. We are here throughout the COP and happy to facilitate the interactions that we already referred to now, and to really advance the work both on the formulation and luckily many more countries now are submitting the NAP, so we can really move to the implementation, and happy to support all that. And with that, I thank you all and wish you a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you.